I've mentioned a few times, especially in my ONWARD review, my world-building elves, about how enraptured I am with contemporary fantasy, especially the modern high fantasy genre. The idea is intriguing. Take your fantasy tropes, throw them into our modern world, and see what happens. The problem is that authors generally take our modern world, slap magic on top, and don't think about how it would affect society. The urban fantasy genre tends to go with a masquerade that really doesn't make sense the more you think about it. The sheer volume of hand-waving that was put into keeping modernity out of Hogwarts makes no sense. While I can see the magic messes with electronics explanation, that still doesn't explain half of it. Have you ever tried to write with a quill pen? If you have, then please explain why anyone would use quills instead of ballpoints for schoolwork if they had a choice. Then there's the fact that they arbitrarily separate out a huge chunk of the world as magical and decide they should hide its existence no matter how absurd the idea of hiding a dragon habitat is. And of course, firearms are never brought out, no matter how useful they would be in the setting. Even my beloved SCP Foundation can't escape this criticism. While I can see hiding a bunch of the more dangerous things from the public, anomalous entities are defined as not being consistent with our world. However, magic is a normal part of their world, and so there's nothing anomalous at all about telepathic children or a chair that teleports where you need to sit down. These should be considered everyday occurrences. Then there's the fact that if magic is a real thing, it should be treated as a science that can be examined and improved. Out of all fiction, the only two universes that really embrace this are Avatar and My Little Pony, both of which are better classified as part of the punk genre than truly contemporary fiction. Other fantasy universes tend to ignore the effect magic would have on the world entirely. Pokemon especially tends to ignore the effects that having sentient magic creatures would have. Entire industries could be replaced by Pokemon, but seems to be almost the same as our own society, outside of the blood sports. Detective Pikachu is the only medium that actually explores how Pokemon would affect society. It's part of the reason why it was so well received. Then, of course, you get into stories that just throw stuff at a wall without really thinking about anything, like Onward, which ends up with a fantasy setting that doesn't make any sense internally. Or stories that just use fantasy species as a thinly veiled allegory for race relations. Now, I will give credit where credit is due, and point out that the Happy Time Murders actually did do a good job of world building their puppet human fantasy world, building out the seedy underbelly of a universe that you can realistically believe lives under the Sesame Street or Muppet Show. However, in the end, there's one thing I have to say. We can't sit here griping on YouTube comments about the source stories we want in movies, comics, and literature. As Mama said, if you want something done right, go do it yourself. So, I published my own modern high fantasy short story, Black Robe Down, on Amazon. It's a military story about an orc entering the modern army. It focuses quite heavily on the world and how the military would operate with a mix of fantasy races and cultures. I won't proclaim to be the next Tolkien. I hope it's worth your reading time. In our current age, it's easier than ever to get published. Amazon will accept almost anyone. DeviantArt and Tumblr make showing off your art easier than ever. If you want to make a webcomic, hosting is available for less than $1 a day. If you want to create physical works, crowdfunding is available to anyone persuasive enough to make $1. You don't need anything special to record on YouTube either. I use a $10 Walmart headset, free video editing software, and yes, Microsoft PowerPoint to make these videos. You have no excuse to not flex your creative muscles and do it yourself. In the classic words of our childhood, don't worry if it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song. Because the best way to get the media we want is to make it ourselves. And buy my book while you're at it. Thanks for listening, y'all.